see all of you guys have joined the session, so please do pay attention, enjoy it, and if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them.
Thank you for this opportunity to space for over 2 decades. I have noticed that processes can often be rigid, confining, and restrictive, and they can actually reduce 3 important elements that are so critical to people dynamics, and that is adaptability, collaboration, and creativity. For me, every process has an essence. It has something that is trying to enable or something that is trying to prevent. It could be a certain value that this process is meant to honor. How can we keep that at the center of all discussions, where we allow collaboration from different stakeholders, we allow creativity to improve and enhance the process as and when needed, and we also allow adaptability for those situations that require a genuine exception. I think keeping the value that we are meant to honor at the core of all discussions can really help us as organizations and teams keep people above processes. Thank you.
السلام عليكم، أنا الدكتور أبو بكر مسدوم، باحث في الاستدامة والمسؤولية المجتمعية. الحين لما نتكلم عن استدامة وصمود المؤسسات، نجد أن كثير من المنظمات تستثمر بشكل كبير في منظوماتها الإدارية من خلال بنوك الخبرة العالمية، ثم بعد ذلك تستثمر كذلك أكثر في منظوماتها الإلكترونية ودمج الذكاء الاصطناعي في منظومات العمل، لكن يغفلون عن شغلة مهمة جدا وهو الاستثمار في رأس المال البشري، لأن الناس يأتون دائما قبل النظام. إذا ما كان عندك ناس كفؤة وذات يعني نضج مؤسسي عالي، لن يستطيعون استخدام هذه الأنظمة وصمود المؤسسات وتطور هذه المؤسسات. مثل ما قال بيتر تانكر أن الثقافة تأتي أو الثقافة تأكل الاستراتيجية على الإفضاء، والثقافة هي مرتبطة بالناس. هناكم إن شاء الله وقت جميل مع كوتش سابر حول هذا الموضوع.
Processes are tools, not rules. They exist to support the team, not to restrict it. When challenges arise, the best insight often comes from the people doing the actual work, not from flowchart. Listening to your team and staying flexible allows you to adapt faster, solve problems more effectively, and ultimately deliver more value. Prioritizing people over strict procedures is what keeps you working human and impactful.
All right. So we believe that the reason you chose this track is because...
Thank you. That's a bit innovative, by the way, because the speaker doesn't work, so apologies for the slight out of sync.
Problem solved. Thank you for choosing this track session, and we believe that the reason you're here today and you chose this track is because you care about people more than process. And by the end of the session, we would like to share with you a free blueprint of a guiding mindset of how to prioritize people over process at a large scale level.
So, 3 reasons to think differently. So firstly, what if success wasn't defined by just a process, but the people that you empower? So empowerment of the people that are within your control as a leader. Secondly, you don't have to feel stuck in a system where people are secondary to process. And lastly, you'll learn ideally why real-life transformations begin with people, you guys, your teams, and not just tools, frameworks, or policies.
So the question is, how to start prioritizing people over process?
It starts with well-being. So many of you have probably worked in organizations where you've noticed people within your control, people that you're working with, face many things such as burnout. And burnout, as you know, it's something that sometimes is seen as something that, it's amazing. Like, I've worked really hard, I've spent 17 hours in the office or 15 hours in the office, whatever it is. But actually what we're doing is we're glorifying something that's not necessarily helpful to any one of our teams or us. A stat of around 76% of employees experienced burnout during the pandemic, which was quite a changing moment for many people across the world. As you know, things such as well-being started to become more of a spoken topic in some parts of the world more than others. However, it's something that slowly the whole world is kind of progressing towards taking more seriously. Again, performance really depends on your mental state. So often we talk about, okay, how are you feeling today? You come into an office, someone might ask you, okay, how are you feeling? And in some environments, people are reluctant to actually open up, and they'll just say, I'm fine, but you might be able to notice it in people's body language, behavior, and that's what we kind of mean around the emotional and physical well-being. And it's something that I'm quite passionate about, because I feel like if you're not asking your team members as leaders how they're feeling on a day-to-day basis, you don't really know them. You don't really know what they're going through. And I think it's important to understand that it's not just something that it's a HR thing to do. Often we say, okay, you know, we care about our teams, but actually if there's anything to do with how they're feeling, they can speak to HR. But we as people in the workplace, we've got to position ourselves in a way where actually we become those people. And again, it's not to say that it becomes a kind of a clinic of some sort, but caring about people is such an underrated skill, and actually something that the more you show care towards the people that are within your control, the more you'll get the best out of them. And lastly, be kind. It's a simple statement, but often we miss that aspect. You don't know what people are going through in personal life situations. It's something I speak to my team members about often. Say, if there's someone in your team that might be feeling a little bit down, ask them how they are. It goes a long way just to speak to someone to say, you know, how are you doing today? And I think more importantly, what it does, it builds that connection between you and that person. And actually, you might turn up one day, someone's a bit low, their voice is a bit low, you understand that, okay, they're going through something, how can you support them? So I always say this to some of my team members as well, to say, like, if you can visibly see that someone is actually experiencing some sort of discomfort, take them away, go for a walk. Another tool and tip that I can offer as well is that just take people aside for like a little walk and a chat and ask them how they are, simply, not about work. Something that I've seen recently in some places, whether it's here, whether it's in the UK, is people often are, if you ask them how they are, they'll say work is fine, but actually it's like, I don't want to know about work. I just want to know how you're getting on, how was your weekend? Coming in into the morning, asking someone, how was your weekend, what did you get up to? These small talk conversations can go a really long way. Leading on to that, understanding people. So people, again, very similarly, people bring emotions, experiences, and context, not just skills. So again, we have teams full of different skill sets, but as we said, people are going to come with various experiences, various emotions. Again, whether they're going through certain challenges, you'll be able to really understand how people respond and react. So an example, again, is when we have team members that face some sort of negative feedback, how are they actually responding to feedback? So as a leader, you should be understanding, how should I give feedback to certain people in my team? Some people might like feedback directly, some people might like it in a way where it's a one-to-one basis, and some people you've got to really take them through a full approach, and sometimes that might be highlighting the positives about them and then slowly framing things such as improvement areas rather than, you know, this is a weakness, and instantly you lose that person. So understanding people in that aspect is really important. Real agility starts with listening and observing, not fixing. So we as leaders, coaches, whatever your position is, it's really important that we listen. So often it might be seen that if you're the loudest spoken person in the room, it's a great thing, but actually it's usually the people that are silent, and you've got to really take in a lot of what the team are saying, observe the behavior that's happening. Empathy builds trust, and trust fuels collaboration. Empathy is very underrated, something that I think every single person should be ensuring that they understand and how they can bring that into a workplace. And lastly, process doesn't solve problems alone. People do when they're supported, trusted, and empowered. And again, this is all around how do we get the best out of our team, and it's all down to understanding the people, whether it's in a workplace, whether it's in a friendship environment. It's really important that you understand the people that you're with, their likes, dislikes, and be open about it. A lot of the time people are kind of closed off if they don't really feel comfortable enough, so it's in our best interest to build an environment where people then feel comfortable enough.
That being said, invest in people. To the point is that education is your way to put forward. And because most of us believe that when we invest in ourselves, this is the only thing that no one can take away from us. In fact, that mindset shouldn't basically stop with us. It should extend to the people we lead. This is why UAE has prioritized talent development to attract globally investment contributing to diverse skilled workforce since 1959, which basically around 20% of federal budget has been allocated to education in recent years. And you've all heard probably around 2071, which is basically a long-term strategy focusing on continuous learning and talent cultivation. And with Abu Dhabi Economic Vision 2030, the plan is to include significant investment in education infrastructure. So the point is here, because system efficient is not only the point, whereas building people is the right critical one that we're focusing on here, especially in UAE region.
So yeah, just continuing on from what Sarah's mentioned then, again, it's how do we, so caring about people is one thing, their well-being, understanding them, but it's also how do we help them grow. And again, there's some great initiatives that are taking place across the region to try and grow people, both within UAE nationals as well as generally workplaces. I feel like it's our duty to support team members on how they can grow. So often people are not used to that, where an example, something I was speaking to someone about earlier, is a simple conversation with some of your team members around, okay, where do you want to get to? How can I support you as a leader to get to where you want to get to? You might be a software developer, you want to move into a different area. How can I support you and build your journey together with you and see what I can offer or point you in the right direction? Experimentation, coming back to our topic around experimentation. So there's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to whether it's transformations, whether it's frameworks, whatever it is we're following, whether it's dealing with people. It always depends on the environment or the person that you're dealing with. Great teams experiment, reflect and adapt, and as you guys know, for those that work in Scrum or other similar frameworks, there's always an element of how do we look back and understand where we can improve what's not worked. And again, the right way of working is the one that works for you. This is something I know has been discussed in a few topics today, is that we often try and force frameworks or a way of working to teams just to kind of say we've done it. And I think it was mentioned in the last talk really well around doing Agile. Too often people are saying, all right, yeah, we're doing Agile, but what does that actually mean? You know, so it's around how we're becoming Agile or how we're being Agile, and that again in the morning was mentioned around the practices and things like that. And frameworks, again, are just there to guide us. So how do we take these notes from the framework, look at best practices, and actually see, do you know what, this is going to work for us, let's give it a go. If it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world, but the main thing that we should, the goal is where we're trying to get to at the end of the day, and it's how we're getting there. We can experiment and look at different ways as we're on the journey.
So with the fail fast, learn fast, the most agile and high-performing teams we've worked with are those who do not actually feel or fear the failure here. They inspect, adapt to grow. And especially in UAE nowadays, where adaptiveness and collaboration, or let's say competitiveness, is no longer an option. It's a survival, basically.
Types of organizations. So sometimes you might hear conversations about this is challenging because it's a corporate organization, or this is a bank, or you know, this is this type of organization or that type of organization. Often we get lost in kind of what we're really trying to achieve. People are people. So whether you're in a large organization, whether you're in a startup, it doesn't really matter. Yes, the challenges are going to be different, but people come first regardless of the contract type or the environment. And why I mentioned contract type is you'll find that some organizations, the focus on people might not be as such because they might not be a direct employee of an organization, so there's less interest in growing that employee. But I think that's where that gap needs to come in to say, this is my team. I don't care where you come from. I don't care what type your contract is, whether you're a full-time employee. It doesn't really matter. For us, it's a group of humans. We're trying to support each other, one another, help each other grow. Look at the best elements of people where they can support and working together. And it's again a conversation we were having over lunch was around how do we make best use of people by understanding their skill set and complementing one another as we're going through it. And generally, change may take longer in large organizations, but that shouldn't stop us. So I think it's important to say, yes, in some organizations, to make a change, it might take maybe a month, 2 months. If it's a startup, so I've been lucky enough to work in a startup as well, to make a change might be instant. It might be someone saying, you want to make a change tomorrow, done. Whereas if it's in a large organization, okay, we got to go through this change process, you got to do this, you got to get it signed off by 15 people, and then you can quite simply say, you know what, forget it, let's just carry on. And that's easy to do. So how do we stay kind of patient enough to kind of last through the entire journey? That's really important in itself.
Which leads us to people over process. Now, recently we've been hearing a lot around AI, frameworks, optimizing workflows as well. But have you asked yourself this question? When system basically breaks down, do we actually blame the process, or do we look to the people who are behind it? And that's the whole point of here. The core is here that with great innovation, great transformation and cultural shift is a human being, which takes us to, as a result, people make or break transformations. And that led us to creating or designing a manifesto around people over process.
So, sorry for all the colours.
Yeah.
But first part of it, if we go into it, go please, sorry.
So basically, we came up with this manifesto where it's a guiding mindset to shift system rigid to human empowered. With that being said, our first point here when it comes to the manifesto, it's value-driven culture over process-driven culture. What we mean by that is that when we put too many rules in a system, it just slows down everything. And what we did instead is, instead of having random conversations in the meeting, we actually asked what matters the most, which goes back to the customer value and centricity here. And the second thing we focused on, rather than having a rigid task list, to OKRs that basically drive real outcomes. And when it comes to the second point, adaptive thinking over cultural resistant thinking. Now, study shows that most of us fear failure, or let's say fear change because, or resist change because we actually fear the unknown. And that's what keeps us from being open about, adaptive thinking and trying new things and experimenting, as we said. So what we did is that we led mindset workshops to show benefits of adaptive thinking, as well as we created change champions within the teams to basically support and encourage new ways of working. And the last is what we did is that we demonstrated quick wins through creating pilot teams to showcase effectiveness of iterative improvements.
Psychological safety is something you've probably heard mentioned over and over again. And people are constantly looking at how we create psychological safety, and often sometimes you'll find leaders saying, I want it to be psychological safety, I want my people to feel safe, but actually the behaviors and things like that are not matching up. So often you'll find that team members don't speak up through fear, or for example, they might say, I'm having this meeting, I can't have this person in the room because then I won't be able to speak. Actually, that means you haven't got psychological safety, because you should be able to speak about anything in a room regardless of who's there. So often we get that mixed up to say, yeah, I've got psychological safety in this team, but then when this person walks in, there's the consequence of if I say something wrong, someone might come after me. So that's often where it leads to disengagement of teams. So if you find you'll have people that are in teams where, okay, you know what, I don't feel safe enough, I kind of come in, do my job, go home, don't complain. If something's not according to what I like, I just deal with it and get on with it. That's where you have the breakdown of teams, which causes, again, an impact on your delivery. And again, people don't realize actually this has a massive impact on the overall vision of the company. Some of the things we did, we created a culture of open feedback. So again, structured retrospectives where employees actually feel heard. So calling in the likes of senior leadership or influential members to really listen, and actually for them to be a bit more open as well. So allowing people to feel safer. And again, that's easy said. So you still get people that are not feeling comfortable, but we try and promote that more often, sharing feedback from certain sessions to say this is how people are feeling. And then again, training leaders on coaching techniques. So if they're taking in some of this feedback, rather than kind of just coming in saying, how dare someone say this about what we work, but actually being empathetic. So coming in and really seeing, okay, you know what, how can we be supportive? Again, leading from the back and making the teams feel as though they've got a safe environment. We modeled vulnerability by sharing our own challenges and learning. So often what you find, and something that I always urge people to try, is always start a session like that about sharing something about yourself. The moment some people see you in a position of leadership and you share something vulnerable about yourself, it kind of promotes them to say, you know what, okay, if this guy's or this lady is going to speak about something, and actually they've been quite open, it just leads to one person. Or sometimes you can even plant someone in the room who you've had a conversation with before to say, look, when I get started, you put your hand up and you share your thoughts, and instantly it creates a bit of a chain. I've done that before and it's worked, so it's something, a little tip that you can give a go.
We'll see that during question answer session.
Yeah, you want to see that? My plans at the back. Empowered leadership over controlled leadership. So what do we mean by that? So depending on where you are in the world, you'll have different challenges. Leadership leadership is seen in different ways. So you might see someone saying, I'm a leader, I tell everyone what to do, this is how you do it. They're not a leader. Slowly you'll tell them that. So it's around empowerment. How do we lead from the back? How are we those people that are supporting our teams? We haven't really got that thought around, you know what, I need to make sure every decision I make is controlled by the way I say. If it's not done, then you're screwed basically. So again, how do we get to a place where we move towards empowerment? So when leaders tightly control every decision, what you'll find is that it removes creativity. Teams become less creative. Over time, people start thinking for themselves. We start asking questions like, oh, why do they not care? Or they're working on a user story, for example, that they don't even know what it plays a part towards the bigger picture, because really and truly, they don't care. They're there to do a job. They've got no trust in leaders. They don't feel empowered. So all of this is a kind of result of that sort of behavior. What we did, we conducted some leadership training, helping leaders focus on enabling rather than directing. And again, the important thing around training is that training is something we deliver. The success of that is not just I delivered it, tick box, I've done my training, perfect, everyone's a certified leader, let's go. No, it's actually the behaviors. So how do we create an environment that if we do some training with leaders and we notice it's not happening, are we calling this behavior out quite openly to the leaders to say, look, I'm going to take you aside, you're moving back to your old ways, how can we work on that? Best idea wins mentality. So this is something that stuck with me from my days when I was at Gymshark, and that's mainly because it was a company-wide value that we said, where regardless of your role, regardless of where you're from, you could have been a customer service agent, you could have been a CTO, it doesn't matter. It's the best idea that wins. So when we're having conversations, sometimes someone's going to say something, make them feel empowered enough to say, you can say whatever you want if it's an idea. If no one agrees with the idea, that's fine, you've shared it. But again, you might say something that someone else doesn't think of. Just because you are in a position of power, that does not mean that you're going to know everything. And that's, I think, the sign of a good leader, is to understand that you're going to be employing people or having a team full of people that are going to be good at things that you're not good at, but how do you push them and support them to kind of help you in the larger scale of things. Shifted leadership mindset from direct into coaching, which is really important as a coach. It's again, how do you start asking the questions? So asking the right questions. You might know the answer to them, but again, it's not telling people what to do. It's actually leading them towards where they need to get to, but actually through their own accord, which is quite important. And delegate key decisions to team members. So sometimes you'll find you delegate and empower people enough to say, okay, you know what, we've got to do this piece of work or deliver this presentation, but before you submit it, make sure I want to review it, make sure that I'm going to make these changes. And you actually then limit that sort of creativity. Sometimes we've got to put full trust and empowerment into our teams, where actually I trust you 100% to own this. You can see it from start to finish. But also I've created a safe space for you. If something goes wrong, I'm not going to come back and say, see, this is why I need to control every single decision that I've said. It's actually like, where can we learn from it? Flexible accountability over rigid compliance. So again, strict processes and rigid rules reduce team morale and make people feel like they're just ticking boxes instead of owning outcomes. What do we mean by that? Some of you might have been part of transformations where, again, it's how do we get teams to start using Scrum? How do we get teams to start doing retrospectives? We want to make sure that it's done. So we're measuring the outcome of these things by them actually happening rather than them creating any value. And this is really important because you can do Agile in a day, right? You have an organization, let's do Agile, let's change your role from a product, from a PM to a product owner, or whatever you want it to be. You're the Scrum Master now. Okay, great, we've done Agile, finished, transformation over. But no, it's continuous, and I think why that's important is, again, things, we said it earlier, if you allow people to understand that the process is there, but again, you can look at your process, assess it, see what works, and be flexible. Flexible is really important because it allows you to assess constantly what might have worked now, might not work in 2 years' time. We all know that the pandemic took place, and we touched on it earlier, some of the impacts of the pandemic on people, some of the impacts, you mentioned quite nicely around the impact that Etihad on, that COVID had. We have to kind of assess what's going on and then be flexible and look at what we need to change. A quick example as well is like retrospectives before the pandemic were very much in person, everyone's involved. Once the pandemic came, that changed. People were online. You might be on a call trying to, as a Scrum Master or a facilitator, you're trying to drive a session, you're just looking at people's names on a screen. you're not getting any sort of engagement. So how do you adapt? You make some ground rules, team working agreements, things like that to say, look, if we're going to have a session, I want everyone to have their cameras on. So at least we can see engagement faces. And again, coming back down to our main point, which is that it builds that people, it builds closeness within your team as people, and rather than just focusing on this is the process that we need to follow. Some of the things we did, we encouraged self-organizing teams to take responsibility for deliverables while ensuring alignment with business goals. So too often, you might find environments where it's like you need to deliver this business initiative, and this is the way you need to do it, and this is how we think you should do it, and this is what we say. That it gets too much. Sometimes it's like, okay, you need to get to this place. How you get there, I'm letting you guys decide. Self-organization. Again, we're not saying just throw random people in, give them the problem, and then say you sort it out. Again, guide them through it. Focus review agreements and success metrics on results, impact and learning, not just task completion. So often it's like, okay, you complete that task, great. Actually, no. The task that you completed, was there value in it? If there's not, how can we ensure that we're constantly measuring that value? We gave teams ownership over their working agreements and encouraged them to regularly assess. So something I mentioned, a working agreement for any team doesn't need to be an Agile team, it doesn't need to be in software development. A team working agreement is really important. It's like, I often frame it as like a set of house rules. So you say to your team, we as a collective are going to be coming up with a set of rules that we will abide by, and if we're not following them, then again, we can hold ourselves accountable. And lastly, enable teams to challenge and adapt rigid processes in pursuit of better outcomes. Relating back to psychological safety, how many of you, again, you don't need to answer it, but how many of you have been in environments where you don't agree with a certain process, but you can't speak up? Yeah?
Of course.
2 hands at the back. So it's, again, this comes down to if you don't feel like something's adding value, or you don't feel like you understand why we're doing a certain process, always ask why. And again, it might be a case of that the answer you get actually gives you an understanding as to why we do a certain thing. I know that's happened to me before, where I've gone into some organization, why are you doing this? It doesn't make sense. And then I come to know through the story that, okay, this is why it's doing, this is why we did this, and this is the reason why. And actually you sit back and say, okay, now it makes sense to me. Thank you for explaining it. So it's not to say that whenever you question something, it's to say, well, you don't need to do that. You've probably all worked with people that have come into an organization very energetic to say, that's stupid, that's rubbish, you don't do this, you don't do this. And often you've got 2 ways to respond. You might think, okay, give it 2 months, you'll understand why we're doing it. Or actually give it some time, understand why people do things for the reasons they do. So,
to recap, so basically our mission here is to build value, purpose, and human-centric approach, and avoid system, process, and systematic that does basically not add any value to what we want to create, which is a purpose. With that being said, this is why People Over Process Manifesto has been created. I think the point here is that we came up with 5 rigid manifestos here. And there are a lot of things that we've done behind this. It's not just over a day or a month or even a year. It took us quite a while, some time, with different organizations to apply this. And we have seen a very good outcome or positive feedback out of this. So we'd like to share with you at the end of the session our blueprint as well.
So just to recap as well, again, hopefully we've shared some useful insights. Again, it's about trying and improving and helping companies across the world, whether you're from the UK, whether you're based here, or any other country. It's again, understanding the challenges that you guys are facing, taking these aspects into play. And again, you can come up with various different methods of doing it, but I think the most important thing we're trying to say today is that, and again, just to reiterate, it's not to say that process isn't important, or we say anyone says process. Process is important, but at the heart of it, as we said, is people. So understanding the people. If you've not got the right people, or you've got not the right understanding of people, but you have processes in place, it won't work. Or it might seem as though it's working, but it won't. So again, it's really important that these sorts of values, or this manifesto, is kind of taken into account with your teams. It won't fix everything overnight, just to reiterate that again. It'll take some time, but again, it's kind of continuously working, learning, using various environments to understand other people's challenges. So I often get a lot of benefit from talking to different people from different companies or different parts of the world around, okay, what challenges are you facing? Even when I move into this region, It was new for me to understand the challenges that people face here. So it's again, how do we understand those challenges? How do you go away and try things that other people have mentioned? And then come back and share our success stories like we've done today. Not to say that we've solved every problem in the world, but we're on the right path towards helping as many people as we can. With that being said, this is our LinkedIn, so feel free to join and connect with us.
Questions? You're taking questions, right?
Yeah.